thought today it'd be quite interesting to maybe go through a few of my sketchbooks. I just wanted to have a quick chat about composition when you're working in an abstract or semi-abstract sort of way, because I think sometimes it's really obvious when you're making work which is a little bit more representational what you need to do in terms of composition. If you're making a landscape, when you're looking at them, there are fairly obvious things that you're doing that will help make that illusion work. And those can be quite easy to see sometimes, or slightly easier to see maybe. But when you're working in a sort of semi-abstract or completely abstract sort of way where you're not really trying to make a recognisable image, it's more about the expressive quality of the paint, trying to get across your feelings, all that kind of stuff. It's a little bit more tricky sometimes to see where the problems are within the images you're making, why they're not feeling maybe as satisfactory as previous pieces you've done or other pieces of work that you've seen elsewhere. So I have lots of these sketchbooks. I've just got a few of them here, and I just wanted to quickly go through a couple of them. I've been doing this sort of work for quite a few years now. And as I go through them, I can see there's some are more obviously landscapey, like this, where there's the kind of sky here and land, and it works reasonably well. And when I look through them, I can see which ones are more successful than others. This is quite an interesting one. I quite like the brooding clouds. The colours are good. It's nice and strong and interesting. And the marks are good. This one too. There's a few I noticed when I was just flipping through them earlier. They don't work quite so well. Something like this, it's okay, but I think it's lacking in terms of the mark making. It's lacking a bit in terms of contrast as well. And so I can see that this could do with maybe a bit of extra work, or not, just stick it in a book and not worry about it too much. And then I'll start flipping through to some of the other ones, which I think are a little more successful. Something like this one. There's a lot more interesting marks in this one. It's got a lot more energy. Maybe it's verging now a little bit more towards the abstracted, but there's still a fairly clear landscape format, sky, land, fields, field lines, that kind of thing. So it's quite easy to see the reasons why I think this one is working better than the previous one I showed you. If I just flip between the two of them. This one's a little empty. The marks are not quite as well developed. And here we've got a lot more marks, a lot more interesting movement going on. So those are the sorts of things I look for in my more abstracted work, and I think it's very useful. I think that's one of the best reasons for having all these books which are full of these little sketches and small paintings, because I'm able to look back through them and it really helps me learn. It's like a learning tool. I can look at these and say which ones are more successful than others and why are they more successful, and then I can do that more deliberately as I go forward. So if I bring one in over here, and this piece may even just be a little bit of an offcut, but I quite liked it, and it's much more abstracted, less of an obvious landscape format. But there's something about the marks in this one which I think really work, and I think that can be very important. There's a good combination of lines, small marks, big bold marks, light and dark. So there's a structure, even though it's very abstract, there's a solid structure to it. And there were a couple of small pieces in here somewhere as well. I've marked it with a pencil. And when I look at something like this, which is, again, it's much more abstract, it's much less representational, it's much less obviously landscape, but it's obviously come from being outside and drawing from the landscape. But again, there are certain things about this which make it work. There's very bold marks, there's a strong kind of rhythm of this solid vertical, these small broken marks here, nice big brush stroke there. So there's lots of interesting things going on, and I think the rhythms can be very important to make this sort of work more successful. So moving on again to something which is slightly more obviously landscape. I think there are compositional elements in here which will start to help me think about my more abstract work. Very strong bold brush marks again, a good mixture of different types of marks going on the surface. There's this sort of washy paint here, stronger paint there. This is quite impasto here. So there's a real mixture of marks, energy, and I think in this one, I think there's this sort of curve here which is bringing your eye in from this edge and around and into the image. And I always think that when I'm working like this, that you need these strong rhythms that will lead your eye around the image. And I think this one is quite a good example of that. Though it is fairly obviously landscapey still, it's beginning to have some of the things that I use in my more abstract work as well. So you may be wondering how these kind of things help me out in my more abstract work. And I think those rhythms are very important, because again, in this one, there's this rhythm of this mark coming round and leading your eye back into the center. If we take this one here, the rhythms are still there, even though the actual piece is more abstracted. The rhythms are still here, bringing your eye down here, these little circular marks, bringing it back up this way, strong verticals. And I think those sorts of things are really important. So when you're looking at your own work and you're trying to work out why some are more successful than others, I find it's often with me to do with these rhythms that I was talking about. So look at this piece here. It's a bit chaotic. There's some quite interesting stuff. The colours are quite good, the contrast's okay, but it's a bit of a mess. It doesn't have that kind of flow. It's a little disjointed. These bits of collage don't quite work. They don't really do what I was intending them to do. So there's some interesting bits in here, but it doesn't gel together particularly well as an image. And if I contrast that with this piece here, which I think is quite successful, there's a much more clearly defined structure. There are a lot of marks, but there's this strong structure between these different parts of the image, even though again it's more abstract, for want of a better term. It's not an obvious pictorial image. There are still these good strong rhythms, these circular marks that kind of work their way through the image, strong contrast between this dark corner up here and the lighter corner down here, these drips that are coming down this way, the lines that are leading your eye around the image. So there's a lot going on in here which I think makes it more successful. So even though it's a much more abstract image, it still has a self-contained, coherent structure. Strong areas of light and dark and strong colour. Bold marks which lead your eye around the image. These contrasting colours as well are helping to make it work. And these small lines as well. So there's a real mixture of things going on in there. And going back to this one here, if I put them side by side, I can see I've tried to do the same sorts of things, but it just hasn't quite worked. Maybe this area here is much too chaotic and could do with simplifying along the lines of this. But things like that. So having these books, having these multiple sketches all in one place helps me enormously, because I can go through them and I can say, what is it about that one that doesn't work so well? What is it about this one that works a lot better? And it really helps me to teach myself what I need to do going forward.